I don't know about you, but the holidays left me feeling a little raw, which is not how I like my data when I'm online. I want it masked. That's why I use NordVPN. So if you're in the holiday mood, go to www.nordvpn.com/Thorin with 3 O's, THOOORIN, and you can get a 3-year plan with 81% off, plus 2 amazing gifts, 4 extra months, and the NordPass password manager app worth $194. No tricky clause to trip you up, just a great VPN at a low cost. Never settle if you can upgrade. Now, even the way I've phrased that will actually to some people seem controversial or unnecessarily aggressive, maybe even, because so many people in the esports world want to believe in players that have played for them, especially if they've had any success. Likewise, similarly, fans will become enamored with a good player or someone who they like, and especially someone who's brought success to their organization. And so actually, I would say, looking across the esports world, perhaps until the more recent franchising era, where some of the top teams have shown a willingness to upgrade and make the big moves for even players like Faker, where it was announced that he'd had a blank check sent from NA basically to come over and join a team. We can probably guess which team that might be. People mostly think, no, if the player's done a lot of good things, like Doublelift when he's on TSM, you should just stick with him. Like, you've had a lot of success. Like, just hope it'll be better next year. Just fix your problems. So the concept of upgrading is one we have to immediately define and discuss, because I think that's where part of the problem comes in with looking at this, which is that, yes, when you have something that's proven, that is working, has worked to this point, it's very easy to look at something that's like an upgrade and say, well, sometimes upgrades don't work. Like, sometimes it doesn't go right. So it's a gamble and therefore I shouldn't do it. It's like, yeah, but the question is, what are you gambling for? So the simple version of talking about an upgrade is to just say, literally, it's just where you try to get a better player at that position. So for example, when TSM got Doublelift to replace Wild Turtle, yeah, easy. He was a better player at that position. It was an MVP level player. And so you upgraded that position. Seems like a pretty obvious move to do. But I would say if you do that approach, which has been the general approach to upgrading across most of League of Legends history, it's one of the reasons I actually think most coaches and GMs and owners don't know as much about the game or don't have as deep an understanding as is implied. Well, the more advanced concept here for upgrading, in my opinion, would be where you take a player and you upgrade him just to someone who addresses a fundamental issue, either that player had or that the team in general had, and that player as a result was perhaps the reason that was a detrimental effect or was part of the fundamental issue behind the flaw. Now, one of the other issues about the idea of an upgrade, and hence why people say, but it hasn't worked in the past for some teams, is because it evokes notions of super teams. And at its most extreme, some of the super teams have been terrible. In fact, most of them in esports history haven't worked. That's because they take the former concept, just upgraded to a better player at that position, ignoring all role balance, like personality balance, what type of style the team plays, what your fundamental flaws are, what your fundamental strengths were. And so I would say that just hints at a lack of nuance. Now, one thing to say here is, within this concept, we're ignoring the premise of player growth. A player who in 2015 will actually be better in 2016. In 2019 will be better in 2020. And the reason why we're ignoring that, it's not that it doesn't happen. Of course, player growth happens. But it's not guaranteed, despite the fact people will think, well, he was doing better in 2018 and then in 2019 he got better, and so in 2020 he'll surely be like, that's not the way it works. Like that, by that logic, every time Bitcoin goes up, you should buy because it's going to go up next time. No, because you need to know what the principles are behind why it went up and what would cause it to go down. Obviously, the second before it goes down, it was going up or holding steady. So it doesn't work that way. Like, that's actually a flaw of the human mind and how we project forwards and how we look at patterns and actually make the mistake of assuming the future will be just like the past, which is a key principle to this particular topic. Another thing is, it's incredibly difficult to predict, as I just implied, when player growth will happen. Like, let's say you have a player who has outrageous talent. Dardoch would be a good example, in my opinion. You might get him and go, right, didn't work for everyone else, but I'll gamble on him. It's like, you know what? I get what you're doing there. I think the actual potential and the raw latent ability within Dardoch, even what he can actually perform on stage, is incredible. The problem is this. It's like having a lottery ticket that one day almost certainly should come through and be really like an incredible windfall. You'll get a lot of money. The question is, when will that day be? So if you buy that lottery ticket for $1 million now, and the lottery ticket, if it pays out $100 million, well, that's brilliant, right? Except I didn't say when it pays out. Like, maybe it pays out in 80 years and you're dead and you don't get to be the one who benefits from the windfall. Well, was it really worth buying at that point in time? Who knows, right? Then, this also depends on how much $1 million is to you. On the other hand, if you had a lottery ticket that was worth way less, but it was just twice as much a payout as what it costs, and it probably pays out next year, that's probably a good investment, right? That's probably a time where you should go ahead and do that, despite the fact that the numbers are way off. Also, I think that the concept of player growth is super flawed when people ignore the notion that everyone in the scene is trying to grow and improve, generally. And the fact that while your player improves, maybe another player who's worse than him improves twice as much. And maybe, here's a fucking crazy concept that I want people in League of Legends to understand. Maybe a player who's already really good improves a little bit more as well. So as a result, oh, but my guy might be as good as his if I have a certain player from academy. Well, what if that player himself is going to improve and get even better and he's already better than your player? Hence why the upgrade angle makes more sense. So the real way to say it is this. It only works, this concept of never settle if you can upgrade. It only works if it's actually a real upgrade. So as a result, you can't let last year's results get in the way of this move. Even if you're a champion, even if you're the world champion. Because what you have to look at fundamentally is, what made you a champion or a world champion? Well, relative to the scene that you were in at the time, you played a style that worked for you, you made strategic decisions, tactical decisions that were effective for you, you managed to get just enough performance or extremely good performance from certain players at certain positions within a certain meta, and crucially, against certain opponents. So for example, one very good reason not to settle and why you should upgrade is because a lot of the teams that will be incentivized to upgrade are the teams that didn't win last year that you beat. So if they upgrade and they change, that changes so many of the parameters, the variables I just listed, that will have to be factored in to why you won this year. So even though your team is the same championship team, this is even if everything else stays the same in terms of their performance, as last year, they're not competing against the same people in the same field, in the same landscape, in the same meta necessarily. So as a result, just as the others change, you have to keep finding the solution to the new puzzle, because the puzzle changes every year, every split, every few weeks potentially. Then you got to look at your relationship with the player and ignore that as well. Sounds crazy, right? But my point is this. Doesn't matter that, I'm really good friends with this guy, or I hope he does really well. If he's really good, but you can get an upgrade that fundamentally addresses issues with your team and potentially makes them better, then you should do it on the basis that, you know what, if this guy is good, he can go to another team and have success. You can be happy from doing that. You can be friends with him while he's in another team. If you are a top team, this is a key concept to this, you're not obligated to develop talent. You're not obligated to develop that guy that was in your team that was good and looks like he's getting a little bit better if you can get a much better player. It's one of the reasons why a classic move in NFL history was when Peyton Manning, all-time great quarterback for the Colts, had a super bad neck injury that you absolutely could not guarantee he would come back from anywhere near the same level of player. And so at the time, the Colts knew if they got the best pick in the draft that they could just get this guy Andrew Luck, who looked like a monster in college. And so they did. They gave up a player who, by the way, now that Andrew Luck's retired, Andrew Luck will never supersede, even for the Colts, in exchange for not gambling on Peyton Manning coming back in that scenario. Now, the reason why I can respect that is because what they did is just say, but if he comes back, he's a different player. Well, that's not the player we just had. Therefore, I can't look at what I just had. I won't even have it now. I actually want to look at what, in theory, to a fan might be a downgrade, but is actually on paper an upgrade now. And even whether that move worked out or not, there's a lot of debate about other aspects of the team. I'd say they didn't give him a good enough offensive line most of the time, Andrew Luck. But I would say in that scenario, I can respect the decision. I get the decision. It's like when TSM replaced Doublelift. I get what they were trying to go for, whether the actual outcome was what you wanted or not, because the outcome obviously has lock and other elements composed within it, and also what everyone else in the scene's doing. So one of the examples, another NFL example that people might go to when I say you're not obligated to develop talent, might be, if you're thinking very topically right now, think of the New England Patriots, Thorin. Like, they've had so much success over the years, and one of the keys to their success, despite what plebs will tell you, is the constantly revolving door of players, or players that they picked up late in the draft, or players that they picked up that were busts elsewhere, or just weren't considered that good elsewhere, and they take these small pieces and they develop nobodies into these talents, or good players, or players who are like among among the best in the league, and obviously a great coach and GM like Bill Belichick's doing that. So doesn't that show you should develop talent if you want to have consistent success? No, because they play in the NFL where the salary cap and the drafting system is practically designed to cause a turnover of top teams. So the fact that they were able to buck that is because they took a very peculiar and unique strategy to how to manage their team that only works within that system. We don't know that that would work in a system where, in theory, if you're just Team Liquid, you could just buy everyone if you wanted. Like, in that point in time, why would you waste your time developing nobodies if you could find the right balance of all the best players, which, guess what, is what they fucking did the last few years. Then, you've got to throw in as well, if you're going to cite what Bill Belichick does in his strategy, even within his concept of getting nobodies and developing them, he's the one who, from Jimmy Johnson, takes that concept of it's better to cut a player a year early than a year late, and applies it ruthlessly. Like, he wanted to get rid of Tom Brady 2 years ago, but before they won another Super Bowl, by the way, would actually probably on paper have been correct, because who knows how many more championships you might have won with the person that they had instead. And also, it wasn't guaranteed that they would win last year. There was a lot of luck involved in that. It was a kind of a miracle run in some ways. So what you're supposed to do, essentially, if you follow this principle, is make the best roster you can each split and year. Because you know what? Your rivals are going to be doing the same, in theory. If they're not, they're just giving you a free advantage. But you can't guarantee everyone else will do that. Now, what's good as well is they won't be held back by the fact that they won necessarily. Like, they might actually just think, oh, well, we came second. Let's make that big upgrade to try and beat you. As I think Fnatic did this year to try and beat G2. I respect that. I think it would have been bullshit if they'd gone, well, we were close last year, so stick with the same team and, see what happens next year. Now, I will say there are some orgs that, to me, are almost inexplicably fine with being second or third year after year after year. Cloud9. I had a bit of a tickly throat there. Well, you reaped what you sow. So one of the areas where I have actually big respect for TSM as an organisation is that instead of settling with just good rosters, they tried to do big upgrades. There's one thing I respect Reginald for, actually, the fact that he went for those moves. So the double lift kick is included within that because on paper, listen, I don't ever think Sven was actually better than double lift. But that was actually the consensus opinion in the entire industry. All experts, all pundits, like every fucking LCS European person would tell you that. All the players would tell you that. So as a result, they thought they were getting a better AD carry. They weren't. They thought they were getting a better bot lane. Now, debatably, they were getting a better bot lane. They just it didn't actually pan out in terms of how it played. So you know what? 2017, they won everything in NA. 2017, yeah, they didn't have the good Worlds performance, but there's no guarantee that the Sven and Mithy bot lane would help you perform in that sense. They'd failed themselves at Worlds. The problem there is it wasn't actually a real upgrade. Like, if I had to speculate, the real upgrade there would just have been Mithy for Biofrost and then keep Sven Skaren and therefore not have to actually teach Mike Young out of jungle. Also, everyone ignored the Mike Young angle. Like, everyone was so all in on player growth and potential with Mike Young that they thought, right, well, if Zen's even just equally as good as double lift, and then Mike Young just went... Well, looking now at the years later, who do you think is a better jungler, Sven Skaren or Mike Young? And do you think it's more that there were fundamental issues with the jungle and how that role's used in TSM, or that Sven Skaren's just shit and Mike Young is better? Because I'll just say, you don't even have to look at the outcome of that one. Just consider the factors at play there, and it's not really that bizarre that it failed. I think G2 coming into Season 9 is a great example. Now, yes, sure, if you can get someone like Perks to role swap and then get Caps in and then get Mickey X, like, these on paper look pretty easy, right? But that's one of the points here. That's an example of a slam dunk one that teams don't do, that the Cloud9s of the world don't necessarily do, that TSM in recent years hasn't necessarily done in terms of getting the obvious better player. So one thing I respect about G2 going into Season 9, 2019, was that they could easily, after how Worlds ended at Season 8 Worlds, have mindfucked themselves Cloud9 style to thinking, this is good enough. Like, you know what, we were in the finals in the first split, new roster, and then in the summer, yeah, we had our issues, but we made it through anyway. And then at Worlds, we beat the number one team in the world, who were the odds-on favourite to fucking win Worlds in RNG. Even one of our criticised players, Hjarnan, came through somewhat in that series. And then in the semis, we got wrecked by IG. But you know what? Everyone got wrecked by IG except KT Rolster. And even they almost got 3-0'd. And so, you know what? If we want to bullshit ourselves, we're like the fourth best team in the world. Fuck it. Yeah, that's fine. You know what? Maybe we'll come back next year with... No, instead they made a whole bunch of players who they liked and claimed that they were good and were growing and developing, and then they kicked them out the fucking door and brought in better players and had a way better year. So why does it work and why doesn't it? Well, first of all, getting a better player at the position is only good for you if it's actually good for your team anyway. As in, if you get a player who's a better support player, but his weakness plays into your biggest weakness anyway, and his strength is so different from the other player's strength that it actually makes your team overall worse despite him being a better player, well, you can see why in that scenario it's not an actual upgrade, is it? Like, it's only an upgrade based on individual metrics. So an obvious example to me would be, if you ask me who was the best mid laner in the LPL, it's easy. I'll immediately say it's Knight9 from Top Esports. But if you asked me if FPX, the most recent LPL champions, the team with the best record in the LPL the whole year, and the winners of Worlds should replace Doinby, their mid laner, with Knight9, I tell you no instantly. Despite the fact that I think Knight9 is a much better mid laner than Doinby. Because you know what? Doinby's the captain. Doinby is the shot caller. Practically the whole team's designed around how Doinby plays. But with that said, the same FPX that won Worlds, I think should upgrade, and as you can see, has upgraded in certain respects. Like, I personally would try and upgrade both top lane and AD carry, because I think you can afford the weaknesses of Doinby because they're covered by the strengths of the support and the jungle. And if you had an even better top and an even better AD carry, I think at that point in time, you might be almost unbeatable. So it doesn't matter that you found big success with those players, you should upgrade if it's on the table and it's a real upgrade. So then there's the consideration, I've alluded to before, that what looks like an upgrade could actually be an on-paper downgrade. I mean, I'll give you a couple of obvious examples. When they brought Gorilla into Misfits over Ignar, now, sure, the timing's not exactly on that one because these weren't exactly like directly. But if we look conceptually, Gorilla's supposed to be better than Ignar, right? Yeah, he is actually. And historically, he's better. I think for most of his career, he's been better. But he didn't address the fundamental weakness of Misfits that Ignar's departure caused in terms of, I mean, just look at his inability to roam and some of the things he couldn't do on that team and engage. Then you go over and you look at, how about when Reckless joined Elements? They were the champions of Europe, the most dominant split in history in Season 4 summer. In comes Reckless, MVP of the same year they were champions, replaces Tabs, a pretty good player, but most people would have said second or third best AD carry. I mean, I personally thought Forgiven was better, so I'd say like fourth or fifth best. Now, was Reckless a better AD carry than Tabs? I'd say overall. But was he for Elements? No, and it makes a lot of sense. He's quite a passive style of player back then. He's not a player actually who wanted to do shot calling components, which Tabs was doing some of. I don't think he even worked necessarily as well in that bot lane. I think it's one of the reasons Elements broke down. So one of the issues here, it's a bigger concept, it could be its own video, but fuck it, you get this gem for free, is there's a big misunderstanding in the scene, in my opinion, that the best team or teams just iterate the formula that made them the best over and over and over again. Certainly some of them try to, and some of them naively think this way. And as a result, they're just waiting to be caught up to. Now, the reality for me, when I've looked at the championship teams, is they're the teams that work the hardest. The teams that repeat championship after championship after championship. The idea is, like, as Doug Collins said when he was watching a Michael Jordan game in the 90s, greatness is greedy. It's the idea that you're always reaching for more and trying to do more and trying to improve more and trying to shore up weaknesses. That's what great teams do. That's why if you win one championship, that means that what you did that split might have worked. If you win a second championship, the odds that you did exactly the same thing aren't that high, in my opinion. You have to adapt. You have to renew, just like your peers do. And by the way, perhaps you keep some things at work, but even then you have to put a new flavour, a new twist on them. You have to disguise them more, or you have to perfect them so that they can't actually be beaten even when someone knows what's coming. Consider that when you're a champion, others study you more than they study your rivals and teams that are much lower down. And as a result, they're going to put more work into adapting to things you innovate or you do well. Think of in the NFL where people solve part of the game, as in a great NFL defensive coordinator finds a really effective strategy against what was previously a dominant offensive player. You'll find many of the coaches, especially the ones with similar defenses and similar types of defensive players, just copy. They'll just literally copy and paste that and start using it themselves. So even though for you it might still be incredibly successful, your advantage is now somewhat neutralized or limited because everyone else is getting the same benefits from it. So you now have to keep trying to progress, keep trying to innovate something new. I'd also say that people can do this in League of Legends. It's been done a number of times. I mean, a very simple example would obviously be all those bans that famously the GE Tigers did against SK Gaming in the spring of Season 5 at that IEM World Championship, the one that TSM won, that then was basically copied by the teams in Europe in the playoffs and allowed them to actually beat a much better SK Gaming team than fucking Unicorns or Love or H2K, quite frankly. So if you want to go back again to that concept of player growth, it applies to individual players as well. The other players in the scene aren't standing still. Like, why is the best player standing still but your player's growing? Like, it's a nonsense concept. It uses some sort of fucked visualization that, like, the really good players, like a battery, that that's at 95%, so even getting 1% more is really hard. Whereas the other players at 70%, so look, if he just improves 10%, then it's way better. Look, it's like, it's so easy to improve 10%. Like, first of all, ignoring that 80% isn't as good as 95%. And then secondly, it's just a complete nonsense topic. Like, I'd say actually the best players are the best players at improving, at working hard, innovating, adapting, not getting caught up on, being able to find a new way to reinvent themselves in some ways. Players like Soaz, Doublelift, you can go throughout history. These are great players that have Faker, that have had to reinvent their game to win their next championship. It's not just keep doing the same thing over and over again, the same fashion with the same player. No, that's not the way they did it. So to me, gambling on potential over proven qualities is always a losing game, except in this scenario here where it's a real upgrade. Like, it's not that much of a gamble, but the reward is great enough that it's actually worth it. So never settle if you can upgrade as long as it's a real upgrade. This video was kindly supported by Alexander Rao, Blunt Smoking Anus Destroyer, Dane Cuskley, Dean Tanglis, Chi Mao, JDubs, NateDOhDoubleG, Peter the Feeder, Tobias Bernasconi, and a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion and Mohammed, Alabdul, Razzaq. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you'd like to ask me a question in my monthly Patreon AMA. Would you like teasers on upcoming content that I'm doing? Maybe you want to take part in a discussion directly with me? Well, if so, then put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description below.